Welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury.
Welcome back to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury, the show that helps individuals and small business owners fight back when the IRS comes calling. Lance Drury is a seasoned tax attorney who's been defending clients for over 20 years with one goal in mind: protecting what matters most. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about something that catches people off guard: a knock at the door from the IRS. This is the IRS knocks on your door. What do you do if you're contacted in person? Lance Drury, sir, welcome back.
I'm glad to be back here, Evan. It's always a pleasure to see you and to talk to you about the IRS in general.
Pleasure is all mine. Listen, Lance, how common is it for the IRS to actually show up to your door or your business in person, like they do in the movies? You know what I mean?
Well, it's not real common. It probably was more common in the old days when there were more revenue officers. But the good thing is that you should never talk directly to the IRS. So if the IRS shows up on your doorstep, you should not talk to them at all and tell them that you're going to get the services of an attorney. I had people several years ago, it was within a matter of weeks, and they only owed about $9,000. And I told them, for what you owe, you shouldn't hire me given my fees. And they said, we don't care what your fees are. The IRS showed up on our doorstep and scared the holy living hell out of us. We don't ever want to get close to them again.
Exactly.
And so they hired me. They paid the fees. We got everything resolved. But, those revenue officers show up on your doorstep, and, they put a revenue officer in your case sometimes when you have several years of unfiled returns, and they show up and they just, they can be ornery to the taxpayer. They're sharp, and they just scare the holy bejesus out of them, which is what they're trying to do. And so you don't want to talk to them. It's like talking to the cops. If you're charged with a crime, it's not a good idea to talk directly to the IRS if you have tax problems.
So who are these field agents or revenue officers? What types of cases typically lead to like that direct contact?
Well, if you get a revenue officer, they're going to want to come. If there's a business, they're going to come and do an examination of the business. If you owe back payroll taxes, they want to see what kind of assets and equipment that you have in the business. And so what we do is we will either show up in place of them, or we'll make sure they're not there, because what's going to happen is if they're there, the IRS is going to start asking them questions, and we don't want them to answer any questions. Now, we will answer their questions through us, but we do not want the taxpayer to talk to them directly, because they'll volunteer information they should never give them. And that's one of the things that the IRS does, is they act like they're your friend. They'll because they want you to open up and talk and volunteer information. And we don't want our clients to do that. So I have gone to businesses before in lieu of the taxpayer, because I didn't know the answers to the questions half the time. And so it's coming from me anyway, so they can't hold that against my client, particularly if I told them something that wasn't exactly correct. So that's what we like to do, is we tell people never, never, never talk directly to the IRS.
So that's kind of paramount to you, not talking to the IRS. But what do you know what I mean? What if they're kind of persuasive? What if you don't have that knowledge, that you don't know what to talk to? What if you say something? Is there anything they can do about that?
Well, most of the time they'll ask a series of questions. They'll put it in a format. They'll send you a list of questions, and then you can go through that with your taxpayer. But the questions are answered through the attorney to insulate the client from any liability for not saying the right thing or whatever. Plus, it allows us to screen it and to make sure that those answers and those responses are not only relevant, but they're correct and they're accurate.
Are IRS agents required to show credentials or identify themselves clearly before they even approach you?
I believe that they are. I believe that they have to show you their credentials when they come see you, just like the police officers generally do. But still, you don't want to talk to them. I mean, I don't care how nice they are to you. I had a woman several years ago, and they asserted the trust fund against her. She was, I believe, she was the treasurer or the secretary in the company. We got her out of most of the liability, but I remember her telling me a revenue officer showed up and he was nice as he could be, and he was nice for weeks. And then after he got all the information he wanted out of him, he turned on a dime. And he was one of the worst revenue officers to deal with that I've ever seen. But
Wow.
he knew how to ingratiate himself to get information from the taxpayers. And she was assessed liability, but we got her out of that liability over the long haul.
Awesome. What kind of questions do they ask though? You required to answer on the spot? You say you're not supposed to talk to them, but what kind of questions do they ask people?
Well, they're going to go through and they're going to ask about their assets or their equipment and what this is used for.
Mm,
And then they're also primarily going to want financial information. They're going to want, and we've talked about this many times before, Evan, they're going to want documentation. If you say
right.
that this is your income for the month, they're going to want your bank records. And do not, and this is a problem that a lot of taxpayers have, is that they're sole proprietors. They have one bank account. You need to have a separate bank account for the business and another bank account for your personal, and don't commingle the two, because any monies that go into your business bank account, even if they're your personal monies and you don't have a paper trail to that effect, they're going to assume that was money that the business made.
Mm,
So that's why you don't want to commingle. Plus, it's easier then for you to see how much money you made. You go in, you see your bank balance at the beginning of the month. You go in, see your bank balance at the end of the month. Then you know how much money you made. But if you're paying personal expenses out of that account, or you're putting personal income into the business account, then you got to go through all of that to figure out how much money the business actually made. So you don't want to do that.
mm. So Lance,
Set up a separate
what
account. Set up a separate account, even if you're a sole proprietor.
so like what if you decline to speak to these people? Like what kind of rights do you have? I just because I can see this situation being awkward. You know what I mean? They're asking you a question, you refuse to speak to them, you refuse entry or decline to speak. What kind of rights do taxpayers have?
They don't have to speak to them. Now, the IRS has the right to get relevant documentation from them to see what their ability to pay is on the back taxes. Fortunately, 85 to 90% of our clients never pay back the full amount. 10 to 15% never pay a dime, but it's all based on their ability to pay it back. And so the IRS is entitled to that information if it's relevant. They can't go on a fishing expedition and just try to get anything. But, they're relegated to that. But the taxpayer has no obligation to speak to them directly and should not speak to them directly.
I know it might sound easy to some people, but I find it's getting more difficult as time progresses as far as technology and what people are able to do digitally. How can someone tell the difference if between legitimate IRS and maybe a scam, Lance?
Well, what happens is the IRS, for the most part, will not call you up. I had a guy, and he's local to St. Genevieve, and he came to my office one day and he said, these people have called me up and said I'm going to get arrested if I don't send them $4,000. And he said, I just sent him $3,000 or $4,000 yesterday. And as soon as he told me that, I said, it's a scam. Do not talk to them. Give me their phone number. And as soon as I called them, identified myself as an attorney, they hung up on me.
Hmm.
The other big scam that's going on is that the IRS, well, the taxpayers will get notices and there will not be a physical address on there. It looks like an official notice from the IRS. It'll say we can settle for 10 cents on the dollars. If their liability is 100,000, it'll say we can settle this for $10,000. It'll have an 800 phone number or an 888. And I tell them it's a scam. Do not get a hold of these people. This happens all the time, and it'll look like it's an official notice from the IRS, but it's not. So don't fall for these scams. There's a lot of scam artists out there. You got to watch it. The IRS is not going to initiate this with you by calling you up. They're going to do it by letter. And so you got to watch this, and you need a tax professional to let you know whether or not these things are scams.
So, Lance, finally, what's your advice to someone who panics or says too much out of fear during an unexpected visit? What would you say to these people?
They better hire us, because we don't want them talking anymore to the IRS, because they're just going to dig themselves a deeper hole. And I've seen this all the time where people have spoken to the IRS, and, then there was hardly anything that we could do for them. I'm just going to give you one case years ago. This guy owed about $40,000. I got him into currently non-collectible, which means he would never pay a dime back. So we wrote him a letter. We're saying our services are concluded. The IRS is going to send you a letter every year. It's just a reminder that you still owe the tax, but they're not coming after you. Well, guess what? He got the letter. He panicked. He called the IRS and agreed to pay every last dime that he owed the IRS. That was over a $40,000 mistake. And if he had called me before that happened, I would have told him, look, they're just reminding you you still owe the tax, but they're not coming after you.
How are you like when it comes to that? You've been in the game for enough time that you get frustrated about that kind of stuff, or you're kind of like, well,
it can be from time to time, and you get clients that you can get frustrated with them because they think we can wave a magic wand and it's going to go away. It's not. It's a lot of work for the taxpayer. It's a lot of work for us to get you a deal, because we have to prove to the IRS that you don't have the ability to pay it back. I wish I could act like Monty Hall and say, let's make a deal with the IRS, but unfortunately, Evan, it doesn't work that way.
You'd be a pretty good Monty Hall. You know what I mean? Lance, appreciate your time, sir.
Glad to be here, Evan, as always.
Awesome. Thank you all for listening to Resilience and Resolve. If you've been contacted in person by the IRS or think it might be too soon, head to lancedrurylaw.com. Lance and his team can step in quickly to protect you and take control of the situation. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, and share this information for people that might find it helpful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.